Lucy Letby, the nurse who is accused of being the worst serial killer of children that this country has ever seen. Many questions to be asked about what happened, why she was not stopped, why she was not spotted earlier, why the NHS appeared to get it so wrong, why, despite the fact that many, many doctors and nurses actually complained about Lucy Letby and her strange behaviour and the fact that so many children were not making it through the process of birth and then incubation inside the baby unit, the maternity unit, followed by the baby unit, why so much bad was happening, and it seemed to be always when Lucy Letby was in attendance. And yet the HR department of the NHS and yet the management of the NHS in the Cheshire Hospital where she was refused point blank to do anything about it. Not only that, but ended up actually having doctors apologise to her, ended up possibly offering her to go to a new station at Alder Hey Hospital, a children's hospital, where she would have had even more opportunity to do worse things to more children. Certainly the Times this morning has got a story suggesting she may even have been responsible for the attacks on more than 30 other babies. She's obviously been found guilty of the murder of 7, the attempted murder of a further 7. The families of those children will never be the same again. They're sitting currently in a Crown Court in Manchester waiting to hear what the sentence is going to be, hoping that they would have seen Lucy Letby there, but she's obviously opted not to turn up for her own sentencing, which apparently is entirely within the law. It is an extraordinary case, an extraordinary state of affairs. That we're going to go to Victoria Innes, TalkTV's reporter, outside the court very shortly. But first, let's say good afternoon to Dr Soham Das, a consultant forensic psychiatrist. Dr Soham, a very good afternoon to you.
Hi there, Mike. Thank you for having me on.
Not at all. The thing about, I guess, serial killers is that people find themselves strangely fascinated by the motivation, by some of the kind of things that they do to appear to be normal, some of the things that drive them. I mean, what have you seen from this case so far that would give any indication or any kind of shine any kind of light on the character of Lucy Letby and how she could have become this monster that she's accused of being?
Well, that's the ultimate question, isn't it? What were her motivations? I suppose as a psychiatrist, the first thing you look at is, was there mental illness? You know, so a lot of the women that I assess have psychosis, so they have these delusional beliefs about children, sometimes their own babies, and that's why they do what they do. Lucy Letby clearly doesn't fit into that camp. We know that she had an element of anxiety and depression in the background. Personally, I think that's a bit of a red herring. I don't think that explains any of her actions. So if you take mental illness out of the equation, then what you're left behind with as potential motivations are, you know, power and control.
Yeah.
Some sort of jealousy or hatred towards the family unit that she wants to destroy, or some sort of thrill, some sort of pleasure of being around the grieving process. And even when I say these things out loud, I appreciate that even though some of the concepts might make sense to us, I don't think anybody can really understand why she would take the step from having those thoughts and feelings to actually killing babies.
I mean, some people have said to me, look, some of the evidence involved in this case is very circumstantial. Some of it is, in fact, hearsay or opinion from various experts, people who have seen things. Some of the methods used were not necessarily easy to track. It's not as though she poisoned people. You know, she was using particularly, you know, stealthy methods, I suppose, of sometimes using air as a device to kill. Lots of people have said there'll be an appeal. I mean, is it possible that she isn't, in fact, a serial killer? Is it possible that, even though she's been found guilty, that she might have caused the deaths of people, but she doesn't have that kind of, I don't know, Rose West, you know, kind of Beverly Allett personality, if you like?
Yeah, I think she doesn't have elements of her background that are red flags. She doesn't telegraph her actions. She's not antisocial. She's not somebody with a criminal record. She wasn't a difficult colleague. You know, she was actually seen as quite a competent and hardworking nurse before these allegations surfaced. So she doesn't. I don't think she fits into a typical category of a serial killer. As to whether or not there's a possibility that she's innocent, I mean, yeah, you're right, it was circumstantial evidence, but it's very, very strong evidence. And I think we have to trust in the system that if a jury of peers found her guilty beyond reasonable doubt, then, you know, there are miscarriages of justice, but I do believe that we have to believe that the system works. And of course, if she is not guilty, if she's in fact innocent, then there's two other possibilities. Either it was incredibly bad luck in that unit, and I think that's statistically impossible, or somebody else did it, and that would beg the question, who else did it? And there doesn't seem to be any other likely perpetrators.
Right. And one of the things that I think is interesting, and I'm sure you'd find this fascinating as well, is that those who say to me, we're not sure about this, or, you know, how could it be that the NHS didn't really see what was going on, partly is a belief, I think, from some people's perspective, that who would want to kill babies? You know, you couldn't possibly imagine that there would be somebody there who would be deliberately snuffing out the young lives of children who'd literally only just been born.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people have an assumption that most people, healthcare professionals, are empathetic and, you know, professional, and they do their jobs properly. So to even accuse a nurse in the first place is quite a step to take, you know. And I think the doctors were courageous in actually doing that, which makes it all the more tragic that their concerns were just pushed away by the managers. Right,
because again, it's too terrifying, isn't it? I mean, when you think, I mean, I covered the Jeffrey Dahmer trial in America, and he was, you know, one of the few cannibals who was ever seen or heard of again. And he had a kind of a drive that was about wanting to have sex with people who were kind of inanimate. He didn't want them to be dead, but he wanted them to be his, and that he was able to do anything with them. And people thought to themselves, well, that's Jeffrey Dahmer. He was kind of preying and picking on people that nobody really knew. He was picking up young men. He was finding young guys on the street. You know, I'm not in danger from that. But if it's somebody working in the NHS, you're suddenly going, hang on a minute, that's a bit different. I could be the victim of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It is really terrifying, and especially, as we were saying earlier, because she didn't telegraph her actions, because she didn't have any red flags behaviour, which is why, in my view, and I think probably in most people's view, it's so important to have a fair system of whistleblowing where complaints are taken seriously, because it's such a huge step to make these accusations. If they are brushed under the carpet, then what's the point of having, you know, a safeguarding system?
Yeah,